Live Check Yourself with Tracy Crossley. How to break relationship patterns and heal your attachment wounds to reclaim your power. Ladies and random gents, welcome to another episode of Life Check Yourself. Today, I am just thrilled to have Tracy Crossley here. I don't even remember where our paths met, but I remember that we connected over pivoting and changing and doing things differently and not being 25 when you do it. And we just bonded. Now we're colleagues and friends. Tracy Crossley is a behavioral expert. She's a trainer. She is the author of the book Overcoming Insecure Attachment. She's had years of experience helping individuals transform their relationships in their lives, and she specializes in relationships in crisis. Is that you? She helps her clients hone in on deep patterns of fear and avoidance to develop happiness, confidence, and build healthier, sustaining connections. I'm so glad that you are here.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
How did we meet? Do you remember?
I want to say it was like at an event, but I can't remember what year because I've been doing this for 17 years. So it's kind of like a lot of it runs together,
It does. It really does. Well, I'm excited to talk about relationships in crisis. And the first thing I want to do is I want to define crisis, because I have noticed lots of the women that I talk to are in things that are less than satisfactory for a really long time, and they just put out little fires all the time. And if you said, are you in crisis? They might be like, no, I'm just not. I'm just this. It's just that. How do you define in crisis? What does that look like? And how do we recognize it?
It's interesting because a lot of us think you're at a crossroads, right? But like you just said, it's a sustainable crossroads that some people find themselves at because there's a level of intensity and there's a level of stuckness. So it's kind of like intense stuckness. So there's this feeling that is driving you to perhaps stay in your circumstances and make excuses for your circumstances. I get a lot of people that are, or they're blaming the other person, that kind of thing. But there's sort of like this just intense, like you're in a bubble that feels very intense and you feel like you're stuck there. And you won't look deeper because you're afraid of the loss. You're afraid of things changing, even though you may complain about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I was talking to someone today, and she has lots of like quarterly crises with her partner and then small ones regularly.
Yeah.
And the question I asked her that I'll ask you is, it seems like, because you don't really ever want to change this relationship, like, is there a possibility there's some part of you that's attached to or comfortable in the victim role, right? Like, why does this person not understand me? Why is this happening to me? So what is that? Can we draw that out so people can go, oh shit, maybe that's me?
Yeah. So it just made me think of one of my clients that I was recently talking to, and she had left me a message saying, he made me this and he made me that. Whenever I hear made me, it's always an attachment. It is always a victim position. That means you have absolutely zero self-responsibility, which we're not really taught. Nobody is really taught that. I wasn't taught that as a child. So we grow up with this idea of what we think relationships are supposed to be, which if we watched our parents, at least in my case, that was a lot of hard work. In fact, that was a lot of my mom doing the silent treatment and my dad being a workaholic. So there's these things that you develop because of what you witness, because of what your experiences are. And so oftentimes we think we're stuck in something and we need to be the victim so people feel sorry for us. So we get that kind of sympathy, not empathy, but sympathy.
Right.
And that kind of keeps us being fed by something.
Yeah. And I think that there's so many of us who feel like, because you said the stonewalling or the silent treatment or whatever it is, right? Like, I have to do this. I have to be the victim, be victimized to get the attention of this other person. And then maybe finally they'll treat me different, or they'll apologize, or they'll change. So there's like, it's almost like a vicious cycle, it sounds like.
Well, it is. And here's the thing that people don't like to hear. It has really not a lot to do with the other person, because you will just go to another relationship. And it's not necessarily that things look the same, they feel the same. And you're going to feel the same unless you do something about yourself rather than worrying about your partner. Because I have found, and I'm sure you have too, that it naturally roots itself out as you do the work on yourself, because how you see yourself changes, what you desire changes. And so then you become the chooser in your life, and you may choose, this doesn't work for me anymore. But I always say, don't do it before you're ready, of course, but it's just,
right.
You kind of build that up.
Right. Well, I was talking to someone the other day about like your prefrontal cortex, you know, like you have to be online and out of victim mode to make a decision about, is this right for me? And I, having been married once for 17 years, and now I've been with my husband for like almost 16 years, which is so crazy.
Wow.
I know it is weird. But it's like, you know, there's that thing of, having to take ownership for your part in it and doing that work, because it's so easy. That's what my client was saying. She's like, it's so easy to blame my partner, you know, because, you know, it just is.
Yeah. I think what people miss is that they're settling for a certain feeling. They're settling at a certain level, right? You never really get to true happiness or true love or any sort of, let's say, positive emotion, because you're so mired in settling for the negative emotion. Because, oh yeah, it sounds good to have fun, but I have a lot of clients who don't really know how to have fun without guilt or some kind of heaviness pulling at them, and they'll go, no, I don't need to go and, you know, do something I've wanted to do for a long time, right? It's like we just stay in this denial to keep ourselves settling, so we're in that comfort zone that feels pretty negative to me.
Yeah, I think that's to me the scariest part, is having these feelings that are so shit, but after so long they just become the status quo.
Yeah. And then you don't, you know, you're trying to escape that too, right? It's like, what can I do to numb myself out or distract myself or blame the other person and punish them? But you're really punishing yourself when you're in this kind of situation, which again, it's that whole crisis thing. You're always sort of in a state of crisis. You know, it's just a long-term crisis, and you're kind of burning yourself out too, physically.
So let's talk about fear, because I think that's at the root, you know, of most of this. Fear that the person's going to leave you, fear of being on your own, fear of having what you want, fear of trusting someone again, whatever it is. So why is fear at the root, and how do we stop letting it ruin, you know, and run our life?
Because we don't commit to our happiness. And I can,
yeah. Mic drop moment.
Yeah. So I'm also married for the second time, and I could tell you pretty much until I met my current husband, which we've been together 8 years. Yeah, pretty much 8 years. So anyways, which is surprising to me too. Yeah. Although my first marriage was 8 years. So, you know, anyway.
Right. You're like, I got this, going for 9.
Well, and here's the thing, and I was coaching people at the time, right? But one of the things I realized was I never had committed to wanting a serious relationship. I had a lot of bullshit excuses, but most of all, I had fear, and I had fear in more than one area. And one of the things that I realized was I had to keep going down this path, right? And the path was going to eventually land me in a serious relationship. But my fear talked to me even after I met my husband, right? Okay. But I through some of the methods that I have, one of the things was not to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
You know, and I would end up staying where I would have ran before. And my thing was to be curious. So it was like I committed to what I wanted, regardless if he was going to be the guy. But I needed to be this person who could be open, who could deal with her feelings, who could not blame someone else, who could be like free and independent inside of a relationship, because that was my biggest fear, was losing my independence. And I married to somebody where, yeah, that's not even on the table as an issue.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something about that fear, because when you say I was committed to the life that I want to have, or the vision or the experience of relationship, and you're saying I'm not sure if this is the person. How can people who are not sure but are committed start to unpack that in a way that is, once they stop the blaming and they start taking responsibility?
You know, what I experienced, and a lot of people that I have worked with, is that what starts to happen, because you have this commitment to yourself. And what I meant by, I wasn't sure if he was a person or not, because what I would do in the past on the first date, I'd make them my person. Okay.
Oh, got it. Okay.
That kind of a thing. Right. So it was like, I was already, we're getting married, we're doing this. But my whole thing was, I need to know myself through this. And so I had good feelings. And that was one thing I always was, when I was dating him, going, I'm smiling all the time and I'm having fun, right? So there was a lightness, but there was also an emotional connection. And a lot of times, in fact, I find this with people that I hear from that have been married for 30 years, someone dies or they get divorced, and then they're like, they find somebody and there is some kind of an attachment issue. And usually they're blaming the other person. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they have like 30 years of work to do, because they've basically ignored that emotional intimacy. They have some kind of pattern in their relationship that makes it comfortable, but doesn't actually make them grow or make the relationship something, again, that you can enjoy. It's probably been a series of little crises all the way along.
And so the piece around making yourself available to the next level of emotional intimacy versus constantly finding the negative about the person or the situation and defaulting into a loop of the shitty question, low quality question. Should I leave him? Should I stay? Is this going to change? Am I going to, because I would assume that that's an awesome, for relationships in crisis, it's an awesome distraction question that never has an end. And I would say also that subconsciously, they don't even really want to answer the question. I don't know. I mean, what happens?
No, they don't. I don't think that people actually have the awareness unless they're completely miserable, unless there's some kind of an event that happens.
Right.
Otherwise they can just keep going on how they've been going on.
Yeah. And I always say, you didn't come this far to get this far. I mean, it's too much work. So emotional intimacy. So avoidance and detachment, right? And I think about, even in my own, like, my default is like, I'm like I have an armored suit, like that's my default is, and I was thinking about this the other day, because I have been with my husband now for like 16 years or whatever. And I got a divorce after 17 years. And so for me, this is like, it's like when you outlive the age that your parent passed away, right? It's kind of like weird. But I was thinking like how it's so challenging to have that like experience of like, because we're going to have challenges are just status quo, right? Like someone called it normal marital hatred, and I just picked that up and I'm like, yes. Just saying.
I'll have to share that one with my husband.
Exactly, right? Because there's more you're like, I fucking hate you. And then you're like, oh, what do you want for dinner? And then you're laughing and watching Love Island on the couch. But so how do we be in the normal experience of frustration or conflict resolution or competing needs? Because all of those things happen in relationship. And also like stay in that emotional intimacy, which is open, while also saying like, this doesn't work for me.
Yeah. So
I know that's a loaded question, but I'm like, let's go.
All right. So in my relationship, as an example, we don't argue very often. Okay. And the reason that we don't, I mean, he and I are very similar in a lot of ways. And so we're both kind of independent, but we have this like emotional intimacy. So like, I'll give you an example. We had an argument this weekend because I said something about his driving because he drives like my grandmother. And
see, I should just get in the car with your husband because my husband drives like Mario Andretti.
Oh, that's me. So
okay. Tracy and I need to live next door to each other, and then our husbands will just switch cars.
There you go.
Okay,
so, and we'll all get there, right?
Your husband is I'm grandma and he's grandpa. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyways, long story short, one of the things I realized early on in the relationship was if I was going to throw my shit on him or he's going to throw his shit on me, it has nowhere to go. Because the deal is you want to take ownership. You want to actually be like, okay, what am I responsible for? If I get triggered, those are my triggers from my experiences, from how I see the world. It's not his fault, and vice versa. And sometimes like if you get in an argument like we did over this, of course it turned into something else, but our arguments don't last long, but then we both kind of go to our corners. And the deal is to be vulnerable, right, in those moments. And I think that's really difficult, and to own it and to apologize when you need to, but to do the deeper dive in yourself and go, what is this? You know, why am I acting this way? Or why does that bother me? You know, like he doesn't like how I drive. So guess what? I'm like, we got to live with the fact that neither of us likes how the other drives. And that's just how it's going to be, you know, and it's not really a game stopper, but you know, the other things that let's say could come up, it's the same thing. And we talk about it. Like, where did this come from? Why is it that when you get triggered, you go in this direction out of curiosity, not because I'm trying to change him or he's trying to change me.
Yes.
So that changes everything when you stop trying to mold your partner into making you feel better because you're in charge of making you feel better, period.
I love that. I was talking to my husband. I have a friend visiting and we were having coffee. We were joking. And I said, oh, yeah, you know, we've moved and we're like having fun and, you know, whatever. And Jeremy goes, really? She just finally surrendered. Which is partly true, right? Mm-hmm. Of like, and that's really an interesting thing that I love that you said that, because when you come from this place of curiosity, and you understand that this human is like humaning because of their own experience. And for me, it's like, and I look back over some incidents where I wasn't my best self. And I'm like, it's kind of crazy, meaning crazy, like ridiculous of myself to be like, oh, you should be me. You should drive like me. You should organize your computer like me. You should everything. And that is so ridiculous. But like in relationships, I'm, and you know, you're doing this all the time with people who are together of like, how can we consciously remember that in the moment so that we can lay down the sword and be like, how is this experience for you? You're different. Even if your way is better or more efficient or whatever, it's not our job to like, you know, call that out or fix it all the time. So talk about that, like this idea of the expectations that we have of our partner.
Well, you know, first of all, it is to keep your expectations right here, right inside of you, meaning expectations of yourself. What are those? Because like you just said, how you're expecting, you know, the computer or whatever, you're going to be disappointed. But you have to look at, well, why do I have expectations of myself, right? And then why is that mirrored or projected out to my partner? What is the, you know, because you're looking for like some kind of comfort zone with it. And the problem becomes bigger and bigger because there's an expectation that just keeps growing. And so what I find is, first of all, you have to know how you feel and why you feel the way you do, because feelings are always pushing out. And so it's, what is it connected to? What do you believe about yourself? You know, a lot of times, and this comes from a study and I can never remember the study, but it's the same thing as if you're not liking yourself and your partner's liking you more, okay, you're going to have a problem with your partner because nobody can like you more than you can like you. And this goes to dating, relationships. So if you're in a down space, right, there's this tendency we want to pull somebody down there with us. Who better than your partner? But,
right. Yes. Yeah. You're like, come on down.
Yeah.
Hook.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. It reminds me. So this the other day, I guess it was last weekend now because it's already going to be another weekend. But I was skiing with my husband, and it was very snowy, and it was a great day, but also a very snowy day. And he was like, "Come on this path," and I was like, "I don't know. I had a ski accident 5 years ago. I'm a little tentative." But I followed him and I went in, and then I was like freaked out. Right. I get these like hyper vigilant, and so he took his skis off or his snowboard off, and he started walking over, and he was sort of pointing literally it's just like, you can ski, you're good. Like he just showed me the path. Anyway, bottom line, go down the mountain. I didn't wait for him. I get a text and he's like, my board is gone.
Oh.
And I'm sharing that I wrote about this, but I'm sharing it because I love your take on it. And so my brain heard that as, and it's your fault.
Yep. Yep.
My board is gone. Yep. My brain hears, and it's your fault.
Right.
And I was like, the old thing, like, you're so, if you wouldn't have the blame, right? Mm-hmm. And I've been doing this work, and I had this realization that my whole childhood, I was always defending either my mom to my dad or my dad to my mom. Like, be nicer, speak up for yourself, that whole thing. And I thought, holy shit, I literally spent my whole life being hyper vigilant. Is someone getting shit on here?
Right.
And so everything that happens, I go, what? Who's getting blamed? Is it me? It's like, it's crazy. Like when I had that realization, I thought oh my God, there's so many things I wanted to be like, to tell, it's not my fault. You're the one who did this. Why did you take me down this path anyway?
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, I'm literally creating a reason to defend myself when there is no reason to defend myself. And so I'm sharing that because I feel like that's an example of what you're saying of wait, what? But it was my old ways. Like, why? You're so dumb. Why did you lose your snowboard?
Right. And it's funny because old me, if I would have gotten that message, not only would I felt it was my fault, I would feel like I had to do something to go rescue him.
Oh, thank God I didn't do that.
Yeah. No, but old me would have. Yeah. And, one of the things is because I've gotten really good at feeling my feelings. Like that's a big thing, the physical sensations.
Yes.
I was like, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're watching this, you just saw on YouTube, you just saw my body clench.
So the thing is that when you're feeling your feelings and you have a reaction to something, it's as quick as you can get in your body. The quickest you can get in your body and locate what the feeling is, you're going to know. Oh, like I've been doing it so long that I will feel this connection and sort of like a release. Because now I'm not up in the reaction anymore. Now I'm down in my body. Does that mean that I'm not irritated or some other emotions? No, it just means I'm more grounded and therefore I can change my reaction and, say something different. But, at other times I might get triggered and it might not be the first trigger. It might be the second or third trigger that I'm able to do that. Or I may have to go, you know what? I am totally sorry. This is just like something that is my shit. And that's it. And I take responsibility, but I don't shame myself and I don't blame him. Because again, I don't like to shove shit under a carpet, but that's what you're doing every time you throw your crap at your partner.
Yes. And I think that's so huge, like mic drop moment, right? Like if you are not owning your stuff, and you are hurling something back, then you're ignoring it. And you're also then just getting an argument about something that's not even the real problem.
Right. And then it's never getting to the real problem, which creates crisis because, I have people that come, early on, like years ago, when I first started coaching, I was doing it in person. And this woman had introduced her boyfriend to me and said he needs coaching. So I was coaching with him. and he was doing great. And then they were on the verge of a breakup. So he brought her in. And what was really interesting, of course, how people describe people once you meet the other person, either they're the total, like ogre,
right?
Or they're like this nice person. And you're like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here, right?
What's going on? Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, so I was working with both of them, and it was so interesting because he had grown and she kept seeing him as the guy he used to be. And so she would be talking about like all this past crap, and she was just stuck in this drama. Even if I was going like, okay, so you're seeing it this way, let's go back in time. And she just didn't want to. And she climbed over both of us in one of the sessions to get out of the room because that intensity of her stuff was just, she didn't want responsibility. She didn't want to go anywhere with it. She wanted everything to be his fault and him to be the bad guy. And the minute she had to take responsibility, that was just like, nope, sorry, I can't do that.
That is such a huge thing too, right? Like if you want your person to shift and you're going to grow and you don't give them the space and then acknowledge that, then how are they supposed to have a new identity? I mean, that would suck. It's almost like when you're a teenager, and I mean, this happened for me is like, I was a bratty teenager, and I swear to God, till I was like 24 years old, my dad would be like, you were such a shitty, teenager. Oh, I can't believe you're doing the dishes. I was like, I'm 25 years old. I'm like married. Like I do the dishes. Right. But that's what it feels like when your parents see you as like you were, or you go home. And so that's like what we're doing to people when we're wanting them to change, but we're not allowing them to change. Yeah. That's so brilliant. Damn, you're smart. Let me ask you another thing about this. So if you were to say, is it true that women normally blame men for the crisis? Or is it 50-50? Because a lot of women are like, why aren't men doing the work? I'm doing the work. I'm da-da-da-da. Why won't he? Da-da-da. Is that real? Do you find that? Because what you just described is the guy being like, sign me up, coach, put me in,
Well, it's interesting because like you said in the intro, welcome women and the random men, right? But I've worked with probably about 30 to 40% of my clients have been men. And what is really interesting is usually, yes, the woman is blaming, but it depends on the attachment style of the guy. Really, it does, because I've had guys that have more of an anxious attachment style. Yeah. And so they'll come in and they feel like the woman holds all the power and they don't have any power, right? So they're in more of, let's say, a victim position. They haven't gotten over something. They're still nursing their old wounds. They're thinking, who's going to save me? And women usually are in that position. But then when you have the more avoidant guy, what's really interesting, so a couple reasons people are avoidant. One is they go on a date, they feel responsible for something they're not responsible for yet. Okay. So they feel like, oh my God, if I'm responsible, I'm going to be a disappointment. Okay. So then you have a guy who's, let's say, in a relationship who runs more avoidant like that. They feel like a total failure. They feel like everything is their fault and all they want to do is get away from that. A lot of people get away from that by having another relationship on the side, know? And they're not happy doing that either, because avoidants also have anxiety. And so their anxiety just comes from different triggers than somebody who runs more anxious. So the whole deal becomes really about not just the attachment style, that's like the foundation, let's say, but then it's also how much have you grown as a person?
Can you outgrow or outlive your attachment style, or is it always your default go-to thing?
Well, I used to run as an anxious avoidant. I do not feel the anxious part of me unless I have a health issue. Then I find that like out of control feeling. I've gotten better over the years, but definitely it's still in the background of like, let's say like I get these migraines with aura as an example. Okay. But then the avoidant part of me, I've had to grow her. She's had to grow. And, like I could be doing things because I can entertain myself for hours. I don't need anybody else to entertain me. Right. Yeah. But I realized that I don't actually feel good when I do that for long periods of time. And therefore I need to connect. And I've gotten really good at connecting instead of having my default be, I'm just going to go, and work upstairs and be by myself. I realized that no, I need to connect with my husband. So again, it became more second nature the longer I've been in my relationship. And that means anybody can actually alter their attachment style, but it comes to that ownership and that willingness to change.
I love that. And I think when you say, for those who are listening who are really independent, I think that that's a very good mask of avoiding. You're like, oh, I'm good. I don't, or like, I can't give you a hug this morning. I have so much on my mind, or, I'm busy or whatever it is, and you may be really busy. And also you might be avoiding actually connecting, having intimacy with your partner.
Yeah. It's interesting. Oh God, I started my podcast 10 years ago, and I had this woman who had written a lot of books on relationships and stuff. And it was really funny because she'd been married and she had kids and she was older, and she's like, yeah, no, not dating anymore. Do not want a relationship. So that whole...
Wait, she was with her partner and she didn't want a relationship with him?
No, she was out of a relationship.
Oh, okay.
She had written a lot of books. She's a psychologist. She had written all these books and stuff. So, but what was really interesting is, anytime I'd ask her about, well, why are you not interested in being in a relationship, right? And she'd go, I love my girlfriends. Those are enough for me. And so when I hear people say things like that, I'm like, well, you're kind of fooling yourself and you're full of shit. You're just afraid and you just don't want to go there because you don't, know what's going to happen. You don't trust yourself. You think that you're going to somehow end up in the same situation you've been in, or whatever happens to be your fear.
I 100% agree. Unless you really, I think there are some people who are just like, have no interest in me, and who am I to judge? But right. I think the default is that, because I used to do a webinar, I'd say, you're living the backup life. You're either like the backup life is with the wrong guy, or the backup life is pretending that you don't need a guy, or you don't want a guy, or you don't give a shit, or you're fine on your own, or whatever it is. And I think that in the spirit of, radical living, like radical honesty with yourself is a really important thing. And I think the best thing about the crisis that you're talking about is that if you do the work, then you have this opportunity to be more of who you are and have the experience that you're wanting and craving, and taking responsibility for that is so much. Nobody wants to be the one who's blamed.
No. And like I was describing this person, right? And you can always tell when it's fear, not life choice, that's keeping you, let's say, from being in a relationship or keeping you how you are in a relationship.
How's that?
And that is because there's anger there. And there's because there's not an ability to talk about it, right? It's like if somebody shuts me down on something, it's like, oh, okay, so there's something there that they don't want to address. And that's the thing, even in a relationship, like I was mentioning, my mom, would give my dad the silent treatment, right? Or she'd get the kids. It's a whole thing.
Right.
Yes.
She was silent. A little bit of a martyr, maybe.
A lot. So a little bit of a narcissist. Anyway, but the point is, when you're doing things like that, you're not growing. What you're doing is you're shutting out what you think hurts you. You're shutting out, what could possibly trigger you, and then you might feel out of control.
Yes. And is the illusion of control is that you're like shutting down or shutting this person away, but really you're just full of shit.
Yeah,
for sure. So let me simplify for this last question. So if you were going to say what are the 3 things or the 5 things or 2 things to actually stop crisis, to stand up, get off that lawn chair in the middle of ho hum and whatever, and stand up and put it away and say, I'm going to change something. What do you do?
Well, I always start with self-awareness, but self-awareness is such a blanket statement.
Yeah.
So awareness of, you're driving down the road. What are your thoughts? You're in the kitchen, maybe you're doing dishes, you're cooking. What are your thoughts? Usually our thoughts are on a story of a problem to do with our relationship. And so when you have that awareness, what you can do is you can actually ask yourself, why? What is it I'm wanting that I'm not getting? And then you can approach your partner and say, you know what? I was thinking about this story about us or about you, and I was getting angry, and I didn't realize I was getting angry, and it actually was affecting my mood, this whole thing in my head. And what I want to do is just tell you about it, not change your partner, but
just
share, you know, and that's kind of like telling on yourself a little bit, because sometimes people think when they share like that they're losing power or control, but you're actually going to get closer to your partner. And to me, that's like a big movement, is to become aware of what is actually your motivation, which a lot of times are these horrible stories that we have of what we're not getting. It's a problem, you know, and you can find this with like any relationship you have. Whatever is the problem is probably going around in your head over and over. And it's just being aware of it and then sharing it.
And if you do this inner work and there still isn't movement, at least if you decide to end something, you really are showing up for yourself and giving yourself the chance to grow. And then the person, you know, it grows together or it doesn't. There's a lot less regret, I would guess.
Usually there is. What I find is when people don't end up together, they've come to a place of peace. But it takes a while to get there, because usually when people show up to work with me, the kind of crisis has been deeply embedded in the relationship, and it's how they relate, or I should say don't relate to each other. And so it's getting to that personal responsibility place that takes a long time, because I've had men, as an example, okay, who are afraid to say something to the woman that they're with because, well, she doesn't want to pay attention to me. She wants to scroll on her phone as we're watching TV. Well, can you say to her, hey, you know what? It'd be really great to spend time with you and watch a show. What kind of show would you like to watch? Because a lot of times when you're on your phone, it's not that you're making this person wrong, by the way, but anyways, when you're on your phone, you know, I don't feel connected to you. And so I'm just looking for ways to be connected. And I had this one client who I can't tell you how long we spent trying to get him to actually say something like that to her, because he thought she would just freak out and leave him.
Damn, it runs deep.
Yeah.
That's why I need to call Miss Tracy Crossley, ladies and gents and random gents. This is so good. So if you would like more from Tracy Crossley, you can go to tracycrossley.com. She's got her book, Overcoming Insecure Attachment. You can go in the show notes for her social media links, but it's Tracy Crossley with 2 S's, LEY.com. I'm so happy that you were here. And if your husband wants a passenger, a grandma, you can tell him to hit me up. Road trip, me and him will follow behind you and Jeremy. We'll get there like 3 days later.
Right. That's what I was thinking. I'm like, I don't know if you'd get there anytime near what we would get there at. Yeah.
My kids actually make fun of me because they said when I drive, I literally do that. I shoulders up and I lean forward and I go, I like make a face. I'm like, anyway, that's okay. I'm a happy grandma. Ladies, there's so many nuggets, juicy nuggets in this episode. This is the one that you send to your friend who keeps complaining about her partner, or this is the one that you make some notes and you go, what can I take from this? Or you just go to tracycrossley.com. But either way, whatever you do, remember, and Tracy said it is always and in always your responsibility to life check yourself. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. Listen, if you're feeling stuck, I want you to know you're not alone, and you don't have to settle for it. I've created a free quiz to help you pinpoint what's draining your energy and exactly how you can fix it. So head over to decodeyourdestinyquiz.com and take the 60-second quiz right now. That's decodeyourdestinyquiz.com. And if you're ready to dive deeper, you can book a free no-obligation consultation at marnibatista.com/private coaching. That's Marni, M-A-R-N-I, Batista, B-A-T-T-I-S, as in Sam, T-A.com /private coaching, all one word. Let's take the first step to creating a life you love on your terms. I'm Marnie, and I'll see you next time.